here. My name is Domingo DeGrazia, LD10, House of Representatives. It's my first session that I'm just finishing out, so I have kind of a brand new way of looking at the legislature from the newbie's point of view. It's not me, but I've been an attorney for a long time, and I've been in the position of being able to cross-examine witnesses, assemble data, and figure out the true story behind what's actually going on. And I think that's really served me well in the legislature. So we're going to talk about two topics kind of generally. The first is why it's important to know where bills come from. And the second is how we can get involved and the ways as a legislator that I would employ to stop bad bills once they come on. Because we know that in the 2020 session in Arizona, we're going to have a lot of bad bills. That's just the way it goes. So why is it important to know where bills come from? There's a certain amount of information that you can glean, that you can pick up from knowing where a bill originates. Now I'm going to throw out a word, a name, and see how many of you have any kind of association or know anything about it. So let's start right now. Goldwater. So those of you that have some kind of reaction to it, that have some kind of history on it, you know that if it comes from the Goldwater Institute, it's likely to have maybe XYZ parameters and maybe to do a certain thing. The reason that kind of history and background is really important is because the devil is in the details. And I'll give you a quick example as we get rolling here. So there was a bill that was introduced in the Senate in the 2019 session here in Arizona. And the idea behind this bill was that it was hospitals that were looking to help more quickly diagnose folks that were getting treatment. And they wanted to use DNA testing to do that so that they could get a profile and then render the appropriate treatment in the appropriate amount of time. Awesome. Bill went, it was submitted in the Senate, went through all committees, got through the Senate, made it over to the House. Came to the House, got through all the committees. Except when I saw it on rules, something kind of stuck out to me about that. Now, rules looks for constitutionality and proper form, so I didn't have a lot of time to look at it. But when the bill got to the House floor, we're voting on it. 60 members of the House of Representatives voting on this bill. There's like 45 folks that already voted yes on it. I'm doing one more pass, my last kind of look at this bill, and that's when the thing that bothered me really caught my attention. And there was an exemption for companies that do home genetic testing, an exemption from the privacy statutes that we have. If this bill had passed, it would have allowed 23andMe, Ancestry.com, any of those that have your genetic information, your profile, to sell that information out to the world. So luckily I was able to get on the mic. I explained to the floor what happened, and the entire floor flipped against it. Now, the second part of that is what I did is made myself a bunch of work, because then I'm the guy that stopped this bill at just about to pass it. So everybody's looking to me to fix it. So I sat down with the sponsor of it, and the hospitals that were really the proponents of this, they had clean hands. So I got really accurate about asking where this language came from that exempted businesses from the privacy part of the statute. Nobody knew. Came from nowhere. Just magically appeared. It wrote itself. Oh, I don't know. So those are the kind of strange things that if you're not really, really acute on what the details of a bill are, some bad stuff can slip through. So now we get back to the landscape of the House and Senate and a little bit of a civics lesson. So the majority controls, the majority wins almost all the time. The reason is that the majority, let's pick the House. The majority in the House picks the Speaker of the House. Speaker of the House assigns bills. When a bill gets dropped, if it does not get assigned, it is dead. But the Speaker can assign bills to committees. Now, the committee chairpersons are also set by the majority. They control which bills get assigned to their committees. So if a bill does not get assigned to a particular committee, the bill is dead. The majority of the persons on each committee and in the majority of the House are the majority party. And in my experience, it's incredibly frustrating because if they want a bill to go through, that bill will go through. That's all. So we're at a disadvantage already when bad bills come up. So you have to kind of resort to other tactics. Knowing where from that bill is coming allows you to kind of think about some other ways that it might negatively impact people and bring that information to light. We had a particular bill that it was kind of curious in the writing because it just didn't feel right. And bad bills kind of come from all over the place, but this particular bill really hit Arizonans. And my colleagues and I on the Judiciary Committee were able to ferret out who the players were on the one corporation that was going to benefit from this bill. Looking at like the Corporation Commission, going through the corporate officers to find out who was on it. And we found out that there were a lot of people that were tied to not only the senator, but the governor. And there were campaign contributions. And so we were able, during the judiciary hearing, to ask the person that was speaking, the witness for this particular bill, ask this person about all those nitty-gritty details and where it was going to go. And oddly enough, this person was incredibly confident and in a way that was kind of uncharacteristic of other folks. And I asked him straight out, I said, is this bill for XYZ company, which is illegal in Arizona? And this person was so confident, he said, oh yeah. They thought that we weren't going to catch on, but we stopped that bill. We brought so much press on it right there, we were able to stop the bill, made it go away. Now, you see national legislation doing the same thing. Stuff coming through ALEC does the same thing. And the problem is that it's corporate players that don't have the citizens in mind when these bills come through. Now, remember that in the Arizona legislature, every session, we're going to have about 1,300 bills that come through. Not all of those get assigned. As I told you, some of them are just going to die right when they're submitted. But the problem is that many of the legislators they're going to be farmers. They're going to be business people. Some of them are going to be, maybe they don't work at all. Maybe they're just hanging out. They've been politicians their whole lives. What that means is that in the myriad topics that are going to come before the legislature, they're not specialists in the topics. So you take non-specialists that don't know all the details of how bills work. They're certainly not lawyers, because there's only probably 5 of us in the House and the Senate. And then you inundate them with a huge number of bills, 700, 800, 1,300, give them an incredibly short amount of time to work on it, and you have folks that are going to be relying on folks outside to know what to do. Now that scares me. That scares the daylights out of me, because thinking, like, I can't imagine looking at a bill and not knowing what to do and then asking, like, Larry, hey, how should I vote on this? That just terrifies me, so I do all my own homework. But a lot of folks that don't have the time or the capacity to do that, they're elected, but they don't have the ability, they're just going to rely on whoever tells them what. You mix that with a fancy hotel, cigars, wine, and the appearance of a bigger entity that's supporting them, and yeah, they're going to submit it, and they're going to vote for it, they're going to tell their friends to do that. So we have some real value issues going on. Now, we have solutions to this. As was said, one of the ways that we can stop the influence of ALEC straight away is you flip either the House or the Senate or the governorship or all 3 of them. Because what happens at that point is then if you flip a chamber, then most of the authority of ALEC goes away. It's just out the door because they cannot control right now. As I said before, the majority controls. You take away that control and then ALEC loses most of its energy. Now, the interesting thing is that I guarantee you, when houses and senates start flipping, ALEC is going to start inviting the majority party, if that's the Democrats, going to be inviting them out. And I can tell you that there are going to be some folks that are going to be susceptible to flipping. Keep a close eye on whoever's in your district. Make sure you know what they're voting on. You have a fantastic view in Arizona right now. You have the most glorious view of what's going on, because in the House of Representatives, we are 29-31. And so every vote is going to matter, and every vote does matter. And the folks that are of like kind of questionable, squishy values on certain topics, they're going to be called out. You can call them out. And if they don't represent you and your neighbors, then you vote them out. Get rid of them. Simple as that. So the action points that I have for you, you're all here, you're all involved. That is amazing. Jump on RTS. I assume you're all voting, so we're going to skip past step 1. So if you're not, you better vote. Jump on RTS, the request to speak system. Make sure that you can have your voice heard at the Capitol. It's a pretty simple and basic system that you can get onto, where you can look at bills and you can search for bills, and then you can opine on what should happen. Now that's a good step. I want you to consider taking one more step. Start setting meetings with legislators and senators at the Capitol. Call up there, say, hey, I'd like to meet with this representative or senator about this certain thing. Some of them are going to reject you straight away. Some of them are going to give you the time of day. What you want to do is build relationships with the lawmakers. You don't have to, don't go in like guns blazing and tell them the way that they should do things. Go in the first time and just start a conversation, get to know them, so that they know you, so that when you call back or when you visit them 2, 3, 5, 10 times, they know that you are a pressure point and you are going to be watching them. This is the way that ALEC does the same thing with the big corporate side. You can do that the same way, just on the citizen side. It's going to take a while to move through this. Remember that in 2008, we had a new president. Companies and corporations like ALEC were starting to form then because they didn't like what was happening. Gerrymandering, capturing state houses, that was their big deal. We are now getting the outflow of that. If you were like me from 2008 on, after the economy crashed, I had my head down, I was providing for the family, I wasn't really paying attention. I was asleep at the wheel, I take ownership of that. We need to correct that now because now we have the outflow. And the way that we correct that is make sure that we have good laws. Everyone that is eligible and that can vote needs to vote. And we need to get folks that represent the values of each community into office so that we can stop these bad bills. And I'd be happy to talk about any other topic that goes in with this. There's like 5,000 subpoints. A lot of this is actually kind of fun for me, getting in the nitty-gritty and really jumping into the details of bills and who wrote them and finding all the bad stuff. So when it comes to question and answer, I expect that you'll come charging with lots of great questions, and I hope, as Mr. Lopez did, I hope that I will have some answers for you.